Absolutely. Good for you. So fast forward, like that awakening that you had in your mind, like I've had enough. I'm opening my own clinic. When did that happen? What date?
Yeah. So August of 21, I knew I was going to get canned and like I needed to do something. And I actually had a conversation with Pierre Corey and I'm like, what am I going to do? I need to go, I'm going to get fired. And he's like, the ICU is not where we're winning the battles. You need to win the battles with early treatment. And I had done a clinic before. So I bought a cell phone. I put up a website called ivermectincan.com. And I started seeing patients and I would go on podcasts like this and I would have 20 people reach out and then 100 people reach out. And I probably saw 300 or so patients in my spare time around the ICU, nights and weekends before I got canned. So I was already building some momentum for that. And then we hit Delta wave in the Midwest and it just blew up.
And that's the rewarding part about what you're doing is you can put your head down every single night and knowing that you fought the good fight, you stood up for what you believed in, you were right, right? Because I just posted a quote this morning, people will forgive you if you're wrong, but if you're right and it proves that the other person is right, they will hate you until they die. They're not willing to come to the table and say, I'll be humble. I was wrong. You were right. Let's work together. It's just so polarizing, right? But the biggest thing that you have done, I mean, how many patients did you save? If you didn't do what you did, how many patients would not be here?
Yeah, I don't know that number, but I think it's more than zero. And I always tell people, like, I don't save your life. I just write the prescription. Like, God's in charge of this. So, we just knew how to treat you. And if it worked out, great. And if it didn't, we did our best. So I started really basic and I would end up sending people to the ER where they would be turned away. Like, we don't know what to do with you. You didn't get a vax, too bad. And so as we went through the Delta wave in fall of 21, early 22, we got better. My brother got sick in October of 21 and that really changed the decks for me. He was over 300 pounds, 6'5", big dude. Right. And I'm like, he got sick. We started early treatment and over the week he stabilized. And then about day 8, he tanked his stats into the 70s and 80s. And I'm like, I know how this story ends. I've done this. I probably had out of 2,000 patients in the ICU, 1,500 or more died. And so I took him to the ER once and they sent him home with nothing. They gave him a bag of fluids. And then I took him to the ER when he dropped his stats and they wouldn't let me in the ER with him. And I said, I've been swimming in COVID for 18 months. Like, you can't hurt me. I'll do whatever. And they're like, no, it's our policy. You can't come in. And he looked at me with terror in his eyes and he's like, I'm not going without you. And I'm like, let's go get in the car. And so we drove back to our hometown. We got oxygen tanks in the car. And one of my nurse practitioners, Cindy, I'm like, I can't drive you if you have a medical emergency. I can't drive and like take care of you. So she drove and we drove about 5 hours to Okoboji to see Dr. Brad Meyer. They were doing hyperbarics and we went to his lake house. He brought a hyperbaric chamber over. He put my brother in it. And like that, his stats went from 79 to 97. And about 10 hours in the chamber, and about 4 days later, he was off of oxygen. And a week later, he was back to work. Wow. And we knew somebody about the same size, about the same age, same health condition. He's a pretty healthy guy. And 6 weeks later, my brother's back to work and forgets this whole thing happened. And the other guy's laying in a bed, trached on a vent still. And I'm like, this is something. And so I knew how families felt, that desperation level, that like, we'll do anything to save our loved one. And so we got better at taking care of sicker and sicker patients as we went through the Delta wave and we started pulling people out of hospitals. Like, I knew the timeline cold from the day they got sick to the day they got into cytokine storm and how quickly we could turn them around with our meds. We had that down pat and we pulled about 50 people out of hospitals.
It just gives me the chills. I mean, just when you talk about this stuff, it just really comes back, what a lot of people went through and running for governor in the state of Michigan. I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people who've lost loved ones because they went in there and they died. They didn't give them what they needed. They didn't take care of them. They shoved things down their throat that they didn't need. And, and they wouldn't let these people come in. And it's personal, I think, for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We had a patient in Kansas City that the family reached out. They killed her. They reached out to us when she was on 5 liters, like on a Tuesday night, say, and we had oxygen delivered to the house, ivermectin, all the meds by the next morning. She was on 8 liters and she's like, I can't walk to the door. So you're going to have to get me out in a wheelchair. And the hospital's like, we're not going to wheel you out. And the daughter said, no problem. I'll come get her. I'll wheel her out. And they said, no, you will not use our wheelchair. No problem. I will go rent a wheelchair and bring it in. And they said, if you approach our ICU, we'll have you arrested for trespassing. And so they didn't get her out in time and she died. That's a Kansas City hospital. That's medical kidnapping.
In the tough part with all of this is they're probably not going to be anyone held accountable. They're always going to say, hey, we did our best with the information that was provided. And they're going to continue to use that get out of jail free card along with the corrupt politicians on both sides of the aisle. They're all garbage in my humble opinion, to be honest with you. Well, there are some good ones, but
and a huge problem in the hospitals is the hospital administrators that were looking at the bonuses and mandating the care, because mandatory testing, everyone, it's not necessarily the frontline doctors and nurses. They have stuff thrown to them. They're working 12 hours. They're exhausted. They're just doing what they have to do, which is no excuse. But, we know about 6% of people are going to stand up when you see something wrong. And that's about the ratio we saw. But the administrators are the ones who saw these bonuses, and the administrators are the ones who threatened to fire doctors for prescribing ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. That's who is to blame, that we're taking 7-figure bonuses on the backs of dead bodies.